Malte, thank you for joining us. You are the CEO and co-founder of Parloa, one of the fastest growing companies coming out of Europe. You've sort of had a really remarkable journey, especially for someone coming from Germany. Since you were 15, you've started your own businesses. You never really worked for anyone else. Maybe just walk us through your mind, why you always knew that was going to be your journey, and sort of how that led you to starting Parloa today.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure. I would say in the beginning, it was not what I wanted to do the rest of my life. It was something that happened, right? Back then, I started things on the side because I had this dream when I was 15. I want to go to Harvard eventually at one point, and I thought, okay, just good grades won't cut it probably, so you need to do something more. So I started to do things on the side, and I got excited to push the limits, to set like high goals, and I got excited actually reaching those goals. And 15 years later, I'm still doing it, setting high expectations, setting high goals, and actually working hard to get there. And that's how it actually started.
Amazing. I guess you've gone through quite a few different iterations of your entrepreneurial journey. And to me, one of the almost genesis moments of Parloa ultimately was 2016, when you and Stefan, started Future Voice, which really was an agency very early believing that voice is going to matter and going to matter tremendously. Tell me a little bit more about how that conviction came about, how you believed in it earlier than anyone else, and how it also felt like being a little bit lonely maybe in that journey until sort of technology caught up.
Yeah. So we looked into different technologies back then. And in 2016, 2017, we saw that voice technology, especially speech to text, skyrocketed, right? We got to 4-5% error rate in like scientific environments. So you could argue we reached human accuracy, more or less. So we saw those technological breakthroughs, and we thought, okay, if we look at voice from a first principle, it's actually the best way how to communicate, right? You can have 120 to 160 words per minute. If you speak, you have 40 to 60 words when you type. We are, as humans, able to speak for 150,000 years, and we're able to type for 150 years, right? So it's actually a pretty good way to communicate. So we thought, okay, the technology is there, and actually it's the best way to communicate. So we believed this is the starting point of how it will change how we automatically communicate between customers and companies, right? Back then, everyone said chat is going to change everything. No one will call the company anymore. No one wants
the Siri days.
Yeah, exactly, the Siri days. So everyone talked about chat, and no one really believed in voice. We had in 2017, 2018, we had 50 keynotes per year. So basically one keynote a week talking like voice will change the world. It took 5-6 years longer than we actually thought in the beginning, but we kept pushing, saying, hey, voice actually matters. And now everyone agrees that it won't just be chat. Voice actually matters a lot, and is actually an interface that makes a lot of sense in the communication between companies and customers.
Totally. If we fast forward those 5-6 years, we get to a really interesting phase in Parloa's journey in many ways. You had two massive events that happened sort of almost back to back in a number of 1 to 2 years. First, you said no to an acquisition offer. I'm sure that was hotly debated internally. And then secondly, despite a lot of momentum, a lot of customers, you decided to completely rebuild the product from scratch. Maybe just walk us through that point in time. I'm sure that wasn't an easy decision to make, even though it turned out to be a very good one in hindsight.
Agree. Should I talk about both scenarios?
Let's do it.
So first, the acquisition offer. So there was end of 2021, we were in a challenging time. We run out of money, more or less. So my co-founder and I, we need to invest $50,000 into the company to pay salaries, basically. We were in the funding round, but we just got no, one after the other. And then in 1 week, one of our customers approached us and said, hey, you build a great technology. We would like to acquire the company. And they offered 7 million back then. So we owned over 90% of the company. So that was a pretty big amount for us. It would have changed our lives. Couple of days later, actually, we got the first term sheet of the round, right? So we had then this decision to make: do we want to sell the company, or do we want to double down and build a generational business? And we obviously picked the path to get the investment and to keep going. So that was, as you can guess, a pretty wild time. Then not so much later, we had a pretty big decision to make. We built our platform still in the old voice bot chatbot era, right? And we always looked at what we built and somehow said to ourselves, so my co-founder and I, that this is not going to work out. So back then you had those decision trees to map a conversation, right? But our conversation, it could go into infinitive ways, right? Yeah. So there's, to have a decision tree actually defining how a conversation flows is not really a suitable path in order to replicate human-like conversations. But back then, there was no real alternative technology, right? And then in 2022, large language models got better and better and better. And we asked ourselves, okay, that might be the solution, but it doesn't really match with what we built. So we had this one offsite, 2 days with the whole leadership team. And we had 2 days a debate, okay, do we build everything from scratch? Because to leverage that technology, you need to build everything from scratch. Or do we keep going and like improve the current product again and again? And there were a lot of people saying, hey, we have so many customers there. Our competitors releasing one feature after the other. We need to keep going and make the current product better. And there was the other part that said, hey, we believe it's a better technology. We need to build everything from scratch, right? So at the end of those 2 days, we needed to make a decision. And I said back then, okay, we need to look at it from our first principles, right? And we need to decide based on what we believe is the technology of the future. And just looking at the technology and from everything we knew back then in voice AI, we believe this is 10x better than everything what we had before. So we made this tough call to say, okay, the next 1.5 years will be painful because we're not going to ship features. Our competitors will ship features. We will start something from scratch. We will take 95% of our engineering resources and build it from scratch on a green field, right? So back then, no one knew if that is the right decision because large language models took like 30 seconds to create an answer. It was not very good in instruction following.
When was this roughly?
That was end of 2022, mid-end of 2022, we started to have those debates, and the offsite was end of 2022, and yeah, then we kicked off, built everything from scratch. It turned out to be the right call, but back then it was a pretty tough decision.
Interesting.
And maybe those decisions to change a company, like you have conversations with founders every day, right? And everyone needs to rethink how they operate in an AI first world. What do you recommend founders you meet on a daily basis, what they should think about?
Yeah, I think, in many ways, the opportunity surface is wider than ever, but it's gotten much more complicated. I think, every 3 to 6 months, you wake up to a step function in model capability. And if you play it well, that's an immense amount of opportunity that you can, work with. And if you don't, it's a big threat to a company. I think the biggest change is playbooks don't really work very well anymore because the world around us is changing so quickly. And so in the last 10, 15 years, there were so many playbooks. People talked about the triple, double, double, and so many ways to build proven paths to success. And I think increasingly, you just need to have the mindset to change and reinvent yourself many times. And so, I think this is a telling story of what so many companies are going through and will have to go through.
Fully agree.
I want to bring to life a little bit what customer support feels like with Parloa and will feel like in the future. So imagine I go on a business trip in a year's time from now, and I'm trying to either inquire about my flight or book a flight. Like, how would that interaction feel like?
Different to what it is before. Let's take an example. Let's take that business trip and let's come up with the Kronos airline, an airline we just like use for that example. If you would call right now, you probably would wait in line for 15 minutes. And if you're connected to a human agent, you would probably talk to a different agent every single time, right? Now imagine you call Kronos Airline again and your personal AI agent picks up and says, hey, Max, how are you? Have you decided if you want to upgrade to business class on your flight from New York to Frankfurt? If yes, awesome. If no, just call me back whenever you want. And then 3 hours later, you could call again, and after 1 second, the same voice, the same personal AI agent, well, all that context picks up and says, hey, Max, and have you decided? And if you don't want to call, maybe on Monday, this personal AI agent might call you and say, hey, Max, there are just 2 seats left in business class. Do you want to have one of those seats? Otherwise, I would give them to someone else. So what we create here is a one-to-one relationship, right? If Kronos Airline has 100 million customers, they will have 100 million personal AI agents. And what we're creating here is not just making customer support or customer experience more efficient. We're actually creating a whole new customer experience that has never been possible before, because having one person per customer was just way too expensive, right? So, and we believe that personal AI agent will not just pick up the phone. This personal AI agent will greet you on a homepage in an app. So it will be your touch point across every single interaction point with a company. And that is the future of customer experience, we believe.
Can't wait for that moment. And
yeah,
not being
we all,
a customer
right?
support line. Amazing. Partnerships have always been important to Parloa. Recently Satya Nadella was on a podcast giving you a big shout out. And there's a new one brewing that has been brewing for a few months. Do you want to maybe share a little bit more?
Yeah, so we're partnering with the ERP giant SAP. SAP is also very strong in CX and with Service Cloud from SAP. A lot of companies globally power their customer support, their customer experience on SAP, and we're partnering. So we are using Parloa on top of SAP to have real-time customer conversation being deeply embedded into SAP to drive the next generation of a customer experience. And we deeply believe in tech partnerships, so we're very excited about that one.
Amazing. Stay tuned. I think, you're a company that started in Europe. A lot of people sometimes look at European companies that come here to the US eventually and almost view that as a handicap. Like you should have just started outright in New York or in San Francisco. You sometimes argue it's actually been a structural advantage to have started in Europe. Just unpack that a little bit for us.
So building a company in Europe, I think you need to look at different parts, right? The first is the talent. Do you find the right talent to build a world-leading company? And I believe yes. So we're very ambitious, very smart, hungry, and experienced people in Europe. Is the density as high as in the Silicon Valley? Maybe not. The competition is not as high. So you need to build a system to get all that talent into your system and attract that talent. And I think so you can make a check when it comes to talent in Europe. The second thing you need to look at, are you able to raise as much money as you could do somewhere else? And I believe, yes, there are a lot of examples that you can raise as much money in Europe as you can in the US. You might do that with US investors, but still, you can. So also check mark about the money you can raise. The third part is, and that is especially relevant for us, coming from Europe, we needed to solve different languages from the get-go. And for us, it's a lot about languages, right? So we needed to solve different kind of complex languages from day one. And that is something that still is a competitive advantage for us, because we are serving large global enterprises that need to operate in a lot of different languages. And we can serve them in a very high quality because we start with that from the get-go. So for our industry where language really matters, coming from Europe and needing to solve those challenging languages from the get-go and having that in the DNA of your company and the product was a huge advantage. So I think there is enough talent, there is enough money, and for us specifically, the language capabilities was an advantage in the beginning. So I think you can build world market leaders from Europe.
Turns out English is not the only language that matters.
It's not the only language. There are a lot of other languages spoken. But Max, you're a German living in New York. You're supporting a lot of a lot of founders from Europe. What is your reason to do that?
Yeah, I mean, Europe is home, and it's always going to be a very special part of the world. And I think I have a little bit of this fear that if we aren't proactive, it turns into this idea of a museum, right? That people marvel at and look at this incredible past, but it's not where people go to build the future. And I deeply believe that entrepreneurship is just the most powerful mechanism that Europe has to bring about societal, positive, and also economic change. And I think this all starts with, role models like Parloa and companies that, walk the path. And hopefully the next 15-year-old Maltes and Maxes, go and pursue that journey as well.
I fully agree. I think we should talk more about that and encourage the next generation to start in Europe.
Yeah. Malte, you sort of surprised me as a fellow German. We're typically very rational creatures. I think there's no country with more BCG consultants than Germany. But you always emphasize sort of trusting your gut and, not just looking in a spreadsheet or in a deep analysis for an answer. Like, help me understand this and how that's guided you through your company building journey.
Yeah, I think to be innovative, I always tell the teams there is no truth out there, because if the truth would be out there, you wouldn't reinvent things or you wouldn't think about things differently, right? And that we believed in voice, we really believed in that, or that we need to build the whole product from scratch. We really believed that this is the right path to go, but back then no one knew it's the right path. And now obviously we reinvent how we work. Just to give you one example, normally if you hire principal engineers, you hire one principal engineers for 50 to 70 engineers, because they go into the most challenging architectural decisions across a lot of engineering teams. We hire one principal for 5 engineers, so we have one principal engineer per engineering team. Something that there is no proof that this is the right path forward, right? There is no spreadsheet that says that's how you should do it. We believe this is in an AI native world, the way how you build high performing engineering teams if you want to build very complex enterprise software. But you need to believe your gut or what you believe will be the future. Otherwise, you're just replicating the status quo, right?
I heard you say, whenever you're part of interviews, and I know you still do many of them, that you sort of look for people that go to Olympia really to win, not just to participate. So I'd be curious where that mentality comes from and how you check for that in the first 10, 15 minutes of an interview.
So let's take that example of Olympia, right? And I think there are 2 parts to be successful in Olympia. It's you need the talent and you need the hard work. So those are basically the 2 things I check. And for talent, it's on the one hand the intellectual capability of a person, because we're in a very competitive, high pace, complex environment where I believe intellectual capability is important to succeed. So I ask challenging questions and see how the people interact and come up with a solution, right? That's the one part, the talent. And the second part is the hard work. So I actually push them and try to convince them that this is not the right job for them, and say this is the most painful, hardest job you have ever had. You could go somewhere else. You have higher salary. You work less. Why should you start here? This will be the most painful job you have ever had in your life. And then you see the ones that get more excited. You see it in their eyes. Okay, that is a challenge I seek. Or you see the ones that everyone says, yes, no problem, I can do that. But you directly understand the difference of the people that really want to go that extra mile. And then the combination of the right talent and the openness, or actually the excitement to go the extra mile. And I think those are the people we need in order to win gold eventually.
Amazing. I wanted to sort of close on something that I saw you bring to an interview actually, a while back, which was this Hamburg poster.
Yeah.
And I think it sort of goes back to an e-commerce business you ran,
Yes.
many moons ago.
Yeah.
And I think that Hamburg poster was sort of your first true product market
Yes.
fit that led to probably 2-3 crazy weeks around Christmas.
Yeah.
What does that era still teach you about how you want to run Parloa today?
Probably there are two parts in the time I learned. I think the one part is details matter. Back then, we ordered the products ourselves, we shipped them ourselves, we wrote actually letters to every single customer, put them into the parcels. We responded to every customer support request, we designed the homepage, and hearing the customers sharing what they think about our experience, I really saw that details matter and customers care about that. And I still share that with the teams, that details matter, how we show up, how fast are we responding, how does our homepage or slides look like. So I think you can have that quality bar, that details are seen by also enterprise customers. That's the first thing. The second thing is, throughout the journey, I think you fail every single day and it's very painful. And throughout that journey, yesterday was the first product market fit, but every day something exploded. And I think to always stand up again and again and again is something that I also try to bring across in our teams. We have one value, which is called optimism. And I think in a hyper growth company where you need to reinvent yourself, things are exploding left and right. You're building the plane while flying. If you're not optimistic, and standing up every single day because something failed, you're not going to succeed. You won't be happy on that journey. And I think that's something I took with me and I try to also share with the team every single day.
Amazing. Beautiful. That's a beautiful note to end on. Thank you, Malte.
Thanks, Max.
Excited for the journey ahead.